DeShawn Foster got his first defensive commit for the class of 2026, but he's going to need a whole lot more or else he'll suffer the consequences for years to come.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, your longtime host, play-by-play broadcaster as well for the last 2+ years. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Welcome back to all you everydayers. Thanks for your support. Where we get started today, we're hammering home what UCLA's been doing on the recruiting trails. You've seen all the social media posts about their coaches on the road at various spots around the country, starting to pick up recruiting for 2026. And you would think maybe UCLA is a little late on that, right? You see USC's trying to put together a number one class, and they're already losing one of their top commits in that number one class. But UCLA sits there with 4 commits until May 14th of 2025. No commits for the 2026 class in almost 6 months before Matthew Muasau committed to UCLA. Does that sound familiar? Well, that's the younger brother of former Bruin Darius, a linebacker, a 3-star linebacker hailing from now Southern California, playing around the local SoCal area. And Muasau, 3-star by 24/7 Sports, 124th linebacker recruit across the country and top 150 in the state of California. So you're like, okay, what makes this important? Well, the 4 previous UCLA commits in this class, in addition to it being 6 months since they got a commit for the class of 2026, all been offensive players, all been expected to be receivers, although one of the players is listed as an athlete potentially. So the Bruins needed something other than a potential receiver to come in. Now, remember, the Bruins went after a lot of DBs in the portal this offseason. UCLA got Nico as a quarterback. They got Madden, his younger brother. They got another transfer from Pierce Clarkson. So the Bruins have set themselves up for success, at least in the transfer portal at the quarterback position. At the running back position, they've got some young receivers in addition to ones already coming in. They needed to replenish the linebacking core that went to the NFL. A lot of guys that graduated. And with most likely not a lot of Carson Schlesinger stories coming up with walk-ons turning into starters, you're going to have to hit hard and recruit linebackers for sure. Think about this. This is a write-up from Brandon Huffman from 24/7 Sports. What's important about this big commit? Okay, maybe this is somebody who can transform the UCLA linebacker room. Maybe it doesn't, but the Bruins have to start rattling off a bunch of commits, especially for their linebackers, because one, UCLA they've lost a couple of linebackers. One to the NFL from last year's team. 2, some have gone to the portal. 3, Weston Port, the guy who signed in 2025, is not going to be enrolled to UCLA until 2027. So you're not going to see that kid for a couple of years. You're only going to see Muasau in a year or so, obviously, for the class of 26. The Bruins did get the former Oregon State linebacker to start this year. So there's a lot of development that needs to happen for this year's team, and a lot of recruitment that needs to replenish lost talent from years past, or else the Bruins will suffer the consequences. But now that UCLA's out there, the Bruins had arguably one of the most active spring portal incoming transfer commitments I've ever seen, with the amount of talent coming in, with the amount of players they've been able to swing into Westwood and keep there to play for the Bruins this upcoming fall. It's like, okay, there's a reason why there's a pause in their 2026 commitments. And there still have been some key 2025 commits as well. But for Muasau, let's talk about him real quick. Muasau in his junior season had a meniscus issue that had surgery. This is from Greg Biggins at 24/7 Sports, their national recruiting analyst. Had surgery at the end of the year, although when he's healthy, inside linebacker, can get downhill and loves to hit, can fill the gaps nicely, read angles, and a good open field tackler. How many times have you seen a UCLA defense not been good at open field tackling? Well, last couple of years, the Bruins have been able to make plays. Hopefully Muasau is a healthy recruit come 2026 after his senior campaign in the prep scene, and finally when he becomes a UCLA Bruin. Continuing this idea that UCLA wants to have a family-oriented recruiting cycle, right? You get Nico and you bring Madden. You bring those brothers. You have Muasau, the brother of Darius, who obviously DeShawn Foster wasn't the linebacker coach, but he was on the staff when Darius was there, and he saw him make his way to the NFL. So maybe you thought, okay, UCLA's always been the front runner for Matthew, but they needed a commitment to show to the rest of the class, let's make something happen. Then you're like, wait a minute. There's Talanoa Ili, who is a guy that is related to the Iamale Avas. He took an official or took a part of a visit or some sort of recruiting with UCLA with his cousin. And while Ely is crystal ball to USC, that's a top linebacking commit in the class of 2026 who UCLA could go after, kind of fitting the mantra of DeShawn Foster wanting to attack the recruiting in SoCal with talented guys, players who are maybe under-recruited or buying into this family-style atmosphere. How do you install and instill the discipline, respect, and enthusiasm for the game? You bring in the family. That's why you brought in the Nico and the Madden together. And then all the ties from the SoCal recruiting scenes, oh, they're connected. They're relatives. How many former Bruins in recent history have younger siblings that are working their way up through their high school football careers that the Bruins can be like, hey, if you come to UCLA, we can make this a big-time family Bruin affair. And all of a sudden, you got yourself a pretty decent recruiting class that with time, development, and coaching, the Bruins could find themselves closer to the higher end of rankings lists, and hopefully that reflects in win-loss totals, attendance records, and the buzz around the UCLA program. That's a lot to take from that, but the Bruins do have to go after the linebackers in the class of 2026. Other players the Bruins have gotten lately that I haven't touched on this podcast, UCLA got a transfer from Ohio State, a long snapper, Morrow Evans. So the Bruins continue to revamp the special teams unit. Remember last year, they brought in a new kicker, and that worked wonders for UCLA. They bring in Morrow Evans, who is immediately eligible from Ohio State. And then, well, I already touched on Pierce Clarkson. Will Carroll is a guy who's been at UCLA or committed to UCLA about a week ago, a new punter from Tulane. You're like, Zach, why are we talking about an Australian rules punter who sits there, a 6'4", soon-to-be junior punter from Sydney, Australia? Let's tell you the numbers of this incoming junior punter to get you excited a little bit about the incoming punter. UCLA's incoming punter had a long of a 78-yard punt. He had, by my counts, I believe, 4 punts over 60 yards. 4 punts over 60 yards. He dropped it inside the 20 11 times, had 19 fair catches, had 11 50-plus yard punts with just endless array of awesomeness. All right. Remember last year, UCLA sometimes had to deal with some shakes, sometimes had to deal with some very good punts. Only 2 touchbacks, and in 42 punts, that's a really good number. So Carroll coming in, a taller, bigger punter for UCLA, coming from the Aussie rules, going from Tulane, that could be a sneaky weapon the Bruins utilize when they have to punt and change field position in this 2025 season. So think about that. A guy who's booted what was the 3rd longest punt in Tulane history, 78-yarder against Oklahoma, no less. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Almost 1,800 yards of punting and only 2 touchbacks to show for that. That's ridiculous. You mix in a new long snapper, and the Bruins making sure they get the big names. They're making sure they're filling in all the talent with all the assistant coaches to go with it, and the Bruins are revamping their overhaul. It's an overhaul from top to bottom, the assistants, the top name assistants, and DeShawn Foster's like, I'm bringing in my guys. We're getting out of the Chip Kelly era and making this the DeShawn Foster, the Foss era for real. So the Bruins are still hitting hard on the portal. Next, we're going to talk the UCLA softball regional. What does that mean? We're going to talk about their opponents, the likelihood of the Bruins getting upset, and who to key in on a couple of key players for some of these teams, and why this is a dangerous regional for the Bruins here in 2025, next on Locked On UCLA. The days are getting longer, the weather's warming up, and people are spending more time outside, which means it's the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard, small balcony, Wayfair is everything you need to make it feel more like you. And with Wayfair's massive selection of outdoor essentials, makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation sets to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all in prices that fit your budget. For me, I live in a community where we all have dinner together. Later in the summer, later in the springtime, always coming together, touch it up with a great patio dining set. It's like, wait a minute, string lights together. It's a great way to have great company over night in, night out. And hey, delivery is free and hassle-free, even for the big stuff. So whether you're entertaining your guests, relaxing solo, shop Wayfair to help you unwind, or if you're like me, have fun community nights all the time. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get outside with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, moving on to the next segment. We are talking about UCLA softball. All right, the Bruins lead the country in victories. No other team has 49 victories. All right, this is a UCLA softball team, the 9 seed. I could argue maybe a little bit higher. I could argue a little bit lower. This is a team 49-10, second place in the Big Ten Conference in the regular season, second place in the Big Ten tournament, hosting the opening regional in Westwood. Same time that the baseball team will be hosting Northwestern with a chance to win their Big Ten regular season title. But for softball, it's double elimination time. Who's coming to the party? It's UCSB, San Diego State, and ASU, some former rivals and some local mid-majors on the West Coast. UCLA is taking on UCSB. So let's focus on the Big West champion UC Santa Barbara Gauchos. What makes them so fascinating? This is a team that in the inaugural year of a Big West tournament for softball, they were the 3 seed, but unless you're a top 2 seed in a 6-team regional that was double elimination, they had to win 6 elimination games if they lost their first game. So you would think they would win their first game against the 6 seed, right? Well, UCSB lost their first game. And then en route to a dramatic run to the Big West tournament title, they won 6 straight games at a neutral site at Cal State Fullerton, knocked out every team. So every team that lost had to go through UCSB, and they eliminated every team in the regional. It's a really weird way to get to the tournament, but here they are as a team that won 6 elimination games in just 4 days. Their pitcher, Malaya Johnson, threw 35 1/3 innings in 6 games, was the Big West Championship MVP, and did that in just 4 days. So maybe they'll be a little bit beat up, a little bit tired from an exhausting weekend just to get to the tournament. But that's a dangerous team you don't want there. UCLA already 2 years ago proved that, hey, this could be a program that is susceptible, if you're not named Oklahoma, anybody in the country, as the number 2 overall seed, to falling and going 2-out in their own home regional. They're just 2 years removed from that. Although with the Bruins having some of the best run differential numbers, some of the best pitching numbers in the circle, I wouldn't expect them to lose to UCSB, but this is their first tournament appearance since 2007 when they made it as a large team 18 years ago, and they haven't beaten the Bruins since 16 years, since 2009. But this is a team that even if they've lost, if they lose that first game, watch out, they could still give you a run for their money, and they are red hot, feeling the fire. Speaking of the fire, let's talk about Arizona State Sun Devils. Let's talk about them. They are a team that was, got to the semifinals. They're the 2 seed in this regional. And here they are, a former Pac-12 rival, former Pac-10 battle rival, 35-19, first regional bid since 2022, made it to the Big 12 championship semifinals and finished 5th in the Big 12 regular season. A team that has, I believe, 6 wins over ranked opponents. These are teams that in this regional have faced some of the best and beaten some significantly talented teams in one-offs in some cases. Maybe not necessarily UCSB. They're dangerous and red hot, but Arizona State has certainly done that. This is a team that's ready to go. And Kenzie Brown, you're going to want to remember that name for Arizona State if the Bruins get to face her day 2, 3, or 4. Kenzie Brown, a unanimous first-team All-Big 12 selection, an ERA of 1.29, a whip under 1, walks to hits to innings pitched, 19-6 record. So basically, the majority of the Arizona State wins have come with her in the circle. 265 Ks. That's almost 12 Ks per 7 innings, and that's the second best mark in the country. And as dominant as the Bruins have been, as much as you'll see Megan Grant and Jordan Woolery, they'll put up their home run numbers for the best home run bashing duo the Bruins have arguably had in an individual lineup ever. I know there's been greats, so many greats in the UCLA lineup, but certainly in modern day and age, when they're hitting the ball out, those are some of the best players as a duo hitting home runs. This is where there's like Brown stuff could play up and cause problems for UCLA. So if ASU gets through their San Diego State matchup, that's a pitcher to look out for. And maybe she doesn't even start game 2. Maybe they're like, all right, we'll wait this out, and then we'll rely on Brown's arm to get us through the rest of those games, just like UCSB did in their conference tournament. So ASU, a scrappy team that's played against some of the best teams. They have a lot of good wins so far this year. Tanya Wendell leads her team in batting average with a .368 average, and they were at 3 hitters that were all Big 12 second team members. So we'll see. 6 wins against nationally ranked opponents for the Sun Devils this year. With the pitcher that has ace stuff and could shut down any lineup and get through a regional weekend and potentially upset the Bruins. And think about it. UCLA just lost to the 8 seed in a one-off in the Big Ten Tournament Championship game, who just beat Oregon, got their way through the semi, and then beat UCLA in the championship game while shutting out the Bruins in their 3rd game in 3 days. That's the difference between single elimination and double elimination. That's how dangerous it can be if Brown is feeling it in the circle. Then we continue with San Diego State. This is a very dangerous team. UCLA already faced San Diego State. They threw a no-hitter at SDSU. I believe it was maybe the best attended Aztec softball game in their history at their stadium. I believe that's what they put, but UCLA won 5-0 through a no-hitter, 37-17. And also, like UCSB, lost the first game of their conference tournament, albeit the Mountain West, a 4-team regional, if you will, and then won the next 4 in a row to make it to the NCAA tournament. So you've got ASU, who's got 6 wins over ranked opponents, UCSB, who won 6 straight elimination games, trailing in 2 or 3 of them, and then you mix in San Diego State, who I think is one of the more dangerous teams you can have in a regional. And if they get past Kenzie Brown in the first game of the regional, that's dangerous because they have played toe-to-toe with Oklahoma. San Diego State has played toe-to-toe with some of the best teams in the country. They went to extra innings with Oklahoma. They beat Alabama. When San Diego State went to Clearwater, Florida, they went undefeated. That includes wins over a ranked Alabama team, then top 16 Missouri team, beating Virginia. UCLA couldn't even beat Virginia. Did lose to Oregon. They did have a matchup earlier this year against UCSB, winning 4-0. A little bit of a lull when it came to the Judy Garmin. And then at the end of the year, got red hot and made it to the tournament, a team that has faced some of the best teams and is ready to go. Okay, so this is no easy tournament, although the Bruins have some good numbers against Big West competition this year. I think UCLA 6-0, so that should bode well for when they play UCSB in terms of gauging the talent. But it's a tournament, and you can never take anybody for granted. Speaking of Grant, Megan Grant is, I think, the key for UCLA this weekend and moving forward in any potential run to the Women's College World Series. Reading from the UCLA preview, obviously you see Jordan Woolery hitting home runs. You'll see Megan Grant hitting home runs. But Megan Grant is that type of player who, just alongside Woolery, a USA Softball Collegiate Player of the Year top 25 finalist just a couple of weeks ago. It is about Megan Grant, who can hit home runs in bunches. There's been twice in this season where Megan Grant has hit home runs in 5 straight games during a week stretch. So if there's somebody who can say, all right, we're going to see your best pitcher in the circle, Grant can take her deep, that's the type of player UCLA has. And as much as Savannah Pola has the best batting average, it's going to come down to Grant getting red hot. Maybe it might not affect this weekend, but a deep postseason run could take a superhuman effort from Grant if UCLA is going to climb the mountaintop and win a national championship again for the first time since 2019. And the other key, obviously, as much as UCLA has some good numbers in the circle, they haven't always been the best at winning close games, and there's been times when their pitching has been susceptible to blowing up and giving up a bunch of runs. So can the Bruins, between Caitlin Terry, Addison Fisher, and Taylor Tinsley, who have each started 16 games and thrown 109 innings, a pitching staff that ranks top 5 in Ks to walks, strikeouts, and whip, can they get outs? Obviously, if you're losing 2-0, that's not on the pitching staff in the Big Ten championship game. That's where the bats get silent. But when it came to holding leads, say late against Virginia when they were playing a neutral site game in Clearwater, the Bruins also couldn't do that. So it's kind of which is going to show up, or the bats, or is it the team that has found ways to lose some close games? But don't get me wrong, UCLA is very good. It's a sneaky tough regional with one team with an elite ace, a very red hot 4 seed, and I think one of the better sneaky 3-seed mid-majors out there on the West Coast, and the Bruins have already beaten them once. So they will have to show up and not fall asleep in this opening weekend. We'll talk more about it and update you, react throughout the weekend here on Locked On UCLA, so stay tuned for that. Next, we're talking about an LA Times article written by Ben Bolch talking about, hey, what's UCLA's latest update about the athletic department finances, their debt, and why is it like that on Locked On UCLA? All right, let's once again talk about the importance of UCLA's move to the Big Ten, right? The Bruins are doing it because they want, obviously, a lot more national exposure. And two, they need money. They're in a whole lot of debt. The athletic department has a huge chunk of change, and that debt's been rising and rising and rising. And it was once again detailed by Ben Bolch beautifully in this LA Times article about why, when you dive into the history, when you talk about these meetings and what it means for UCLA to be in such big of debt, here's what UCLA is, and this is what makes this article fascinating by Ben Bolch. The reasoning for some things that UCLA just has to deal with, that Martin Jarmond has to deal with, that we just don't understand in various times. Think about John Wooden. This is how this article starts. His paychecks were signed by the student body president, not the university president. John Wooden, the late super great John Wooden, his paychecks were signed by the student body president. And you're like, wait, what? Why is that like that? Well, there was an agreement from the 1920s to the 1950s where the students ran the campus bookstore, cafeteria, and intercollegiate athletics. And if you go to a public school in the UC system or even a Cal State system, you'll know the name Associated Students, all right? Whether it's an ASI or in UCLA case, it's the ASUCLA. So Associated Students UCLA is a student majority board of directors. And for a while, in the early 20s to the 50s, they ran UCLA's athletic department, and some of which they signed the checks for John Wooden, which is absolutely mind-boggling, right? John Wooden in his last year was making $32,000. Think about that. When he was winning a championship, the greatest coach of all time, he's making $32,000. Now, obviously, money change, and you can adjust it for inflation and everything, but that's still a mind-boggling total. And students, by the time the end of his career came around, were no longer signing those checks. But because UCLA decided, hey, maybe we shouldn't have intercollegiate athletics run by Associated Students, there's a difference between, they're going to go bankrupt. The bookstore's not making money. The cafeteria is not making money. So how do you subsidize the profits and make sure that the Associated Students don't lose money? So this is something that happened way back when, that there was a decision that the bookstore has control over logo rights for UCLA t-shirts, sweatshirts, and other merchandise, an agreement that was made 65 years ago. All right, this is what the Times reports about John Sandbrook, a former assistant chancellor under the Chancellor Charles Young, and the bookstore, which is run by ASUCLA, that's Associated Students, UCLA, and they have that control. So think about all this money that when you're buying this UCLA merchandise, it's not going to the athletic department. It's fascinating that you're like, wait a minute. UCLA has debt that's close to $219.5 million over the last 6 fiscal years. Now, the Bruins expected to get about $75 million from their Big Ten deal. The university, which is separate from the athletic department, has helped to bail out the Bruins athletic department. I believe what the article said was close to $30 million. You'll see that in some regards where the university will step up to help fight off the athletic department debt. That's almost at every university because nearly every athletic department has a lot of debt except for a very few. And UCLA is not one of those athletic departments, considering how many sports they have and how much additional travel they have to do, that is going to run. You see the number, you see the attendance numbers, they're not running it. And if you see the logos that are owned by the bookstore and the students, they're making that money. That's not going to the UCLA athletic department. So in the UC Regents meeting, remember the Regents who are the same Regents that are talking about this legacy agreement with the Associated Students, UCLA, one that was made 65 plus years ago. Stephen Agostini, I could probably say his name wrong, UCLA's chief financial officer. They're like, we've got financial difficulty. And the UC Regents probably sitting there like, yeah, isn't that your problem? The same UC Regents that are like, you left the Pac-12, so now you got to pay alimony for years. So on top of having a deficit, they're like, how are we supposed to deal with this travel, deal with all the money from additional costs being in the Big Ten? As much as they're going to get $75 million, why are they still paying Cal? That's not really the point of this article. But think about that. They're just adding to the list of financial difficulties. What's interesting is Agostini talked about when he served as an associate vice chancellor for budget and finance at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. All right. UNC, the big university at North Carolina at Chapel Hill, that there's differences between what makes their finances at UNC to UCLA. And it's almost like UCLA's own legacy agreement is hurting themselves. They're shooting themselves in the foot. Like, wait, the athletic department with all these logos, all these cool things, it's not going to the athletic department. And this is what Agostini was quoted as saying in this article. When I arrived on the UCLA campus, I was a little surprised since I was accustomed to having those income streams be available either directly to athletics or collected at the university level. And this is his second year at UCLA. It's a very unique situation. He continues to quote Agostini, the chief financial officer for UCLA. The inability to access those revenues means we have one less tool in the toolkit to address the spending, not just in athletics, but anywhere on campus. All right. Last six fiscal years, almost $219.5 million. So I would tell you, hey, think about this. Go read this article by Ben Bolch. It's a great article. But you're like, wait a minute. Even back in the early 60s or mid 60s, UCLA would have to rent out the Pauley Pavilion. That was for intramurals. So it's not like it was UCLA basketball's arena. They would have to rent it out for using it because there was no athletic department money that helped build it. UCLA had to basically, as the athletic department, rent Pauley Pavilion way back when. That's how backwards it is. And what's also addressed is how some schools in the UC system, and you'll see some schools across the country too, but for UC Davis, UC San Diego, they're paying an extra fee to help boost the funding for the athletic department. It's an athletic department fee that the students agreed to vote on to pay themselves so their teams can be competitive. That's not something that UCLA has. But if you think about the amount of students UCLA has, and if they're going to add an extra fee that necessarily can't be waived, that the students vote to put on themselves, think about how much more money they could potentially get. Now, obviously, colleges are way out of control when you think about textbooks, just tuition, anything that comes with the pricing of living in California, in addition to Westwood. But still, it's a fascinating thing that UCLA, with legacy agreements, moving to the Big Ten, as much as $75 million a year is going to help. What other costs is that going to hurt? And that they don't even make money off the logos that are owned by the bookstore, which is run by the Associated Students UCLA. So they're not even getting that money. It's crazy. It's a fascinating thought. I encourage you to go read it and give Ben Bolch the love for this article because it's great reporting. There's so many more things in this article, but just like, wait a minute, what's backwards? And should UCLA start being proactive? All right. I know there's a lot of hate given to the UCLA AD and some of the UCLA decision-making, but the chancellor, Julio Frank, who is about to be formally inducted, I believe, is what he said. There's a lot of things the Bruins have to work on. All right. Because there initially was UCLA being run by the Associated Students when it came to intercollegiate athletics, but then the chancellors slowly took control. So this is where the athletic department has to partner with the chancellor, partner with the financial people of UCLA, and figure this out. It's not like the UC Regents are helping. They're listening to this meeting like, oh yeah, well, you decided to move to the Big Ten. Well, it's not helping that we get to pay, what, 7 to 8 figures to another university up north that has nothing to do with our decision in Cal. In addition to having to pay all these athletes to come here to make money, that's why it's so crazy in this era of college sports. All right. Details, but I would encourage you, hey, this is a fascinating thought. Read it. If you're like, okay, what Zach talked about, great article by Ben Bolch of the LA Times, the UCLA beat reporter, about the financial status of UCLA. There's other reports he's talked about too, but the Bruins are saying, hey, is this a sustainable model? And the question is, and the answer is, I'm not sure. The question is, how can they fix it? Well, only time will tell. If this has been a great move, a stupid move, or a fun 10-year, maybe 5-year jaunt with the Big Ten before they move back west, we'll find out. That's why we'll be here with Locked On UCLA to talk about it every step of the way. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your support. We'll talk more UCLA recruiting, talk more UCLA softball, baseball, basketball recruiting, the hype of the football team coming up for 2025, everything and more. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA. Fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.